morning, good afternoon, and good night, wherever you're tuning in. We are Slava and Jonathan, bringing you the Side Quest podcast, where we talk about character development, stories, and all things that are world building. And we occasionally take side quests, because, frankly, that's how conversations work. Just as a reminder, this whole show is spoiler heavy. So sit back, tune in, and join us on this episode of Side Quest.
Well, we're back. Good morning, Slava.
Good morning, Jonathan.
We've got a special guest on with us today, Abby from Books and Crannies 2023 on Instagram. Welcome, Abby.
Hi, good morning.
First off, thank you for recommending this book to us. It was a good read.
Yeah, I loved it, so I'm glad that you picked it.
Awesome. And this is episode 3 for anyone tuning in of our Girl with All the Gifts series.
Abby, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what Books and Crannies is all about?
Hi, I'm Abby. I started at Books and Crannies in 2023, so hence the date on the
Nate on the
or on
Instagram.
the tag.
Yeah.
Yeah. I originally started a Pango Books store, which I still have. It's just an online bookstore because I've always wanted to own a bookstore. So I started that, and then I started getting into the Bookstagram community. And I was like, oh, this is really fun. I started finding out that you can help indie authors by reading like advanced reader copies. So I transferred more into a Bookstagram. I still have my Pango bookshop. I have like 500 books. So if anybody needs any books, they're all around here in my basement.
And where can they find it? On your Instagram account, they can find the link to your Pango bookstore?
Yeah, it's Pango Books / Books and Crannies. But I have my link in my Instagram. Like I have a ton of vintage books, which are really cool. I kind of collect books as well. And I've always loved books. I was a creative writing major actually in college, so I'm also a writer.
Nice.
So that just and I've been reading since I was little. So yeah, it kind of spurred that. And then I just kind of focus on, I like spooky books, like not super horror. I like ghost stories and zombies and stuff. So I focus a lot on that. But also I like post-apocalyptic dystopia type things as well.
Very cool. We're of the same mind, or of the same heart, if you will. I like spooky stuff. I like dystopian. Something I often use the term on this podcast, things that are off the beaten path, that are not straight stories. And this is why I think this book is so unique, because there's a twist to the dystopian and to the zombie literature. You don't expect it, because this is unlike all of the zombie content that I've ever consumed. This is completely different. So,
now,
pretty cool.
You said that you did creative writing in college. Are you writing your own book at all yet?
I have one. I actually submitted it in October, but I'm waiting to hear back. They said it probably wouldn't be until later this year, because they opened submissions in February. They asked me to submit it earlier because I know the guy who co-owns the publishing company.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, so it's the first longer thing that I've written, but it's more of a chapbook because it's like half poetry, half prose, and it's a ghost story. So I think it's pretty cool. Yeah.
Very nice.
Sounds like a fun mix.
Yeah.
Hopefully you can send us a message to keep us updated on it.
Yeah, I definitely will.
Let's do a quick recap. So in episode 1, we kicked off our journey into The Girl with All the Gifts. We dived into the world that M.R. Carey created. We explored the background of him as a writer, comic books, screenplays, and we emphasized a little bit his knack for blending science fiction and horror. And I think what really surprised us, or maybe you shouldn't have, but there was emotional depth to this story, which I assume is the same for the rest of his stories. So the first discussion, we centered on the book's origins, as a short story, its evolution, and then eventual adaptation into a film, which we haven't seen. And we can talk about it if you've seen it. We unpacked major themes: survival, humanity versus monstrosity, and moral ambiguity. And then we set the stage for episode 2, where we explored the plot in more detail. We broke it up into key chunks. First, Melanie's life in the research facility. The ethical dilemmas surrounding her existence were dissected, pun intended. Next, we followed the group's journey into the infected wasteland, where survival and character development took center stage. This is where Jonathan really started to enjoy the book. And then finally, we discussed the climax, where Melanie's decision reshapes all of humanity, the future of humanity. And we ended on that this is a vivid world that M.R. Carey has built, and I think the scientific grounding is what really drew us to the story too. One of the key elements that drew us to the story, because it seemed that it wasn't too fantastical, and yet it had those elements that were creepy and horror-esque. And
yeah, it kept it grounded in Earth's reality, if you will, so that we could relate to, like, oh yeah, science exists. These seem like plausible paths forward with the science. So it was good. And just so everyone knows, this is the final episode with Girl with All the Gifts. And next time we'll be looking at Apocalypse Z, which was another Instagram recommended book by Instagrammer NotSure2090. So that'll be fun to dive into. Hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. This is one journey you won't want to miss.
well, Abby, we'll get right into it. What initially drew you to The Girl with All the Gifts?
So I actually have a friend who's really into zombies, and he recommended this one to me. But I think the idea of children being the zombies being held in this facility was real. I think you mentioned it earlier. It's just like something unlike other zombie books. And then I also fungus zombies are my favorite. Like The Last of Us. I think
Nice.
that I think it's the most believable. And it's also like kind of gross, more gross than the other ones. So I found out that it was like a fungus thing, and I was all in after that.
Sold on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way it starts out, you're introduced to the premise that this is completely different. Melanie is somehow different than the other people, and you quickly realize that she's a zombie, but not really a zombie. So do you think Melanie's perspective as a hungry kind of provided a deeper, I don't know, emotional resonance than a more traditional protagonist? Like, she was just a girl stuck in an apocalyptic world, which could be a cool story in and of itself, but she's a hungry, but not.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, yeah, it makes it a really unique story. And at first, you don't know that she's like a hungry. And so you're like, why are these children in cages, locked up, being in these chairs, all strapped down? Like, it sounds terrible. And it just sounds really, really weird. You're like, what's going on? And so I think immediately you have empathy for these kids, especially because they're children. And Melanie just seems so like innocent and sweet and just wants to learn everything. So I think there's definitely more emotional attachment to her. Again, it's just unlike other stories because you don't have the perspective of zombies usually because they can't think or do anything.
Right.
And that goes into the whole moral ambiguity. And I don't think it's that ambiguous because I have opinions on it. Dr. Caldwell's, it's not ambiguous to me at least, but the way it's presented, the writer did a good job, Carey did a good job, where Caldwell's just blind ambition to finding a cure, she thinks of these people as test subjects and nothing else. And so you're already on Melanie's side because you're like, who's this psycho trying to literally dissect kids while they're alive? We don't get a lot of internal thoughts of the other kids, but you get Melanie, and you're like, well, maybe Melanie is an outlier. She's a genius among these kids. If she's the genius, there's still something in these kids that is quote unquote human, will, intellect, emotion. What the hell is going on? And you're quickly thrown into this world that's kind of dark. And I also like kid stories. I like coming-of-age stories. And the audience knows I mentioned this with Stephen King's It and a couple of other stories that we read where kids were, if not central, they were at least tangential to the plot. There's something that draws me to it. And maybe it's because I was a voracious reader when I was a kid and I read a lot of coming-of-age stories, just happened to be the ones I picked when we were doing like either reading clubs or reading challenges at the local libraries, which was a thing in the 90s. I've always felt drawn to those kind of stories. So to me, getting thrown into this little girl's world, I was hooked from the first couple of paragraphs of the book.
I, on the other hand, struggled to really dive into the book until about halfway through. And that's, I think, simply because of how I approach stories. I come at things I was actually discussing this with my wife last night, of how I think compared to how other people think. And I'm always looking, well, let me back up. The way that I look at my life, I have like not a 10-year plan, but like a 100-year outline of like things that I want for my life and family, and the next, like, we'll say anywhere from 4 to 12 generations. And so like this is how I look at life, is like in a very long timeline. So that sometimes makes stories difficult for me because I'm like, okay, let's get to the next thing. And so for me, it was really difficult to get into the story until the 36th chapter, which is the 50% mark. So, because I'm like looking for like, okay, what are the questions that we're trying to answer? So, like the example I used in a previous episode to talk about this was Lord of the Rings. We know the goal is to destroy the ring, but all the things along the way keep us intrigued. But I know the one question we're trying to answer is like, will it happen? Will they destroy the ring? Or with the mist, we start getting questions like, why is the government around? Like, there's more questions that are asked early on. And because there weren't, it was difficult for me to get my talons in it into the book and go, okay, because Slava made fun of me. He's like, it's a survival, that they want to survive. That's what they want to do right now. And I was like, yeah, but like, that's like table stakes for a zombie book. So I'm like wondering, like, what are the questions we're going to answer? And so for me, it was a little difficult to get into it until the halfway mark, where we start to see like zombies who are also having these human tendencies, like the mother with the carriage and the guy flipping through, kind of singing himself a song. And it's like, oh, okay, these are the questions I was waiting for. Like, why are they doing that? Like, what are we learning about that? So that's my little taste of this book. I have not read as much horror or zombie material as sounds like both of you have. So it brings me to a question here, Abby. For you, is the scientific grounding of like the fungal infection with the zombies and stuff, because you mentioned that you like fungus zombies specifically, I assume that enhances the story for you, but like, does that plausible science in horror, like, do you love that, or was it just a nice extra?
For some reason, I love just like there's this whole just like fungus, like body horror genre, and I feel like it's getting bigger now. And for some reason, that's like really interesting to me. And like I said, I love The Last of Us. It's one of my favorite games too. So I always think that, yeah, like the fungus part is just so much cooler. And then there's also like the cordyceps, I forget what it's called, but yeah, the cordyceps fungus basically like actually exists, and I don't know, you might know this, but it basically like will reanimate dead ant bodies in real life. And so
Yeah.
yeah, and so it's
I'm
a
looking this up while
thing.
you talk.
So it's a thing that actually happens, obviously on a smaller scale, and they've like done studies, and it doesn't do anything to humans, but yet. So it's
Okay,
just, yeah, it
calm down there,
definitely is.
Kevorkian.
I'm just yeah, but I think that it does make it more interesting to me because it is more believable to me than just like a virus or something that
Unknown
suddenly,
virus. Yeah.
yeah,
So,
zombifies people.
okay, so you said they tested it on humans. A, why do you know that? B, were you involved in this testing? You can
I w-
blink twice.
I was not. I was I just or I don't know if they've tested it on humans, but they have scientifically said that it
Sure.
doesn't it doesn't like work on humans. So I assumed that they tried it. I don't know. I like to know random things, so I look these things up.
Yeah, this I didn't know. I didn't do any research on this specific fungus, but there actually is a zombie ant fungus, Orpheocordyceps unilateralis. So, yep, that's
Yep.
your science word of the day, folks. Manipulates behavior, controls, infects, death grip, fungal growth. All right, if you're writing a story, this is something else you can add into it. This is okay, cool, very cool. I didn't look up that this was a real fungus. I
Yeah.
just assumed it was. But that makes it even more fun. So let's jump to the end of the book real quick. Melanie ensures her survival of her kind, but at the expense of humanity. How did that ending hit you? Was it something hopeful or tragic or somewhere in between for you as a reader the first time you went through it?
I think it was somewhere in between. I was thinking more about Pandora's box as I was thinking about it. I guess when I first read it, I think it was hopeful still because it seemed like there was no option. Like she found out that humans couldn't be cured, but there were these hungries that were half human, half zombie, and she, yeah, like ensured that they would be able to like survive. And so there's some sort of humanity that's surviving in this. Then I think she did the kind thing of turning all the humans except Miss Justinu into hungries as well, so they didn't have to be attacked by the kids, like all the hungry kids like everybody else did. So she decided, Melanie and her all of her smartness, that it was the best thing to do.
Nice. So you mentioned Pandora's box, and we actually got into this in one of the last episodes. So how familiar are you with Greek mythology?
I am a little bit familiar, so I kind of knew the base story, but then last night I went more through the story to make sure that I knew, because at first I was like, how is this related to Pandora's box? And then I was like, oh, it's very related.
Yeah, we got into that pretty not heavily, but like Slava was surprised on that as well. I really enjoy ancient myths, I guess I'll say, like Roman, Greek, Japanese. I audible a lot of things, but there's like a world mythology, I guess we call it a course on Audible, and there's actually like some really fascinating myths in Africa that I feel like I was never
Mhm.
taught growing up. And anyway, that's just a side note. So how do you feel like the Pandora's box framework of a story was used in the book? Do you think it was used effectively? Do you think it could have been stronger? Because you talked about how the first time you read this book at the ending, it felt like it had some hope to it, but it sounds like on subsequent readings that maybe that might be in question for you as the reader.
Well, I still think that it was hopeful. But I don't know that the Pandora's box myth theme was really spread out throughout it. I can see how
Yeah.
it was in the beginning and the end, and especially how Melanie was Pandora basically, and she was like obsessed with that myth. She was the girl with all the gifts, is what they called
Yep.
Pandora. So I thought that was cool. And then I was thinking that maybe it wasn't until the end that she really opened the box, which would be like opening the pods, I guess. And then what remained was,
Right.
yeah. And what remains would be the hope that there could still be some sort of humanity, even if it's half hungry, half human.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because I'm reading a portion of Super Summary, and it's like a Cliff Notes, and we've used it for some of the books. I think Super Summary for my brain just helps me look at chunks of books, and then they provide their own themes and analysis of it. And they said that Rosie, the big truck or bus that they're on, that's like a self-sustaining mobile lab, really never gets them to Beacon. The humanity's approach to dealing with Melanie, to Pandora. I don't want to say meta because that sounds like I'm crawling up my own butt, but it's quasi meta where you have Pandora's myth, and then Melanie is Pandora, and the thing that's trying to save them from Pandora ultimately fails. Human responses to people like Melanie and to this catastrophe, this apocalypse, has failed. Caldwell is the prime example of how humans have failed in this situation. And the fires, the shadows, kind of, I feel, are the same thing that Carey's trying to say. The fires are just remnants of the humans' attempts to fix this problem, and it hasn't worked. You have Parks and you have Caldwell, and that's kind of the only two approaches the humans have tried. That's their two approaches in this book. Then you have Justinu, who is the outlier, and then she survives, but ultimately she's going to die of either starvation or something. She can't live forever, right? Like in this new world. But I thought that was interesting, and that even the last beacon of hope, and there's no pun intended, but Rosie, the last beacon of hope to get them to what's called Beacon, ultimately becomes a prison for Justinu, and Caldwell and Parks are dead.
To your point, though, I want to go back a second. Abby, you mentioned that Pandora's box is really only touched on in the front end and the back end. I was trying my best in a previous episode to like articulate that, but that's how I felt also. I know the story of Pandora's box and how Pandora is basically Eve, if you will, in this early stage myth, and she like lets all these things out into the world because the gods tricked her and blah blah blah. And I'm like waiting for this thing to happen. So I'm constantly like filtering the book through Pandora's box, and I'm like, oh, this doesn't really line up, and okay, well, the next thing. And so I'm like waiting. So the way you put it is much more articulate, and that was like what I was trying to describe, I think, because I was like waiting for this to happen, and then at the end I was like, oh, she lets out the spores. Okay, got it. Now I understand. But like it was this gap for me. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm expecting it. Even like the name of the book, right? Like the girl with all the gifts, and they define it. I think the story set up at the beginning with the name structure and like, hey, this is what this name is. This is what it means. Like, oh, okay. That was a strong opener for me.
Yeah, I think Carey did a wonderful job putting it together. I mean, I could nitpick some things, and I think I put a few nitpicks in the previous episode, but for me, it was just enough. And despite what Jonathan said, and it's true, that it didn't dawn on me how much of the myth was used. I even saw less of it than you guys are now describing. I like the subtlety of it. Preparing for this episode, I thought over the disagreements Jonathan and I had and kind of the back and forth about what we liked, what Jonathan didn't like at first. I'm like, all right, let me be more objective than just I really, really like the book. And I think one of the aspects of the writing is the subtlety of Pandora's box and some of the other maybe even feminist kind of views of Justinu that are thrown in. And then the whole hope of humanity. All the themes are subtly sprinkled in, but enough for you to get hooked. And so as I thought about it yesterday and this morning, and as you guys were now talking, it was confirmed, if you will. I'm like, yeah, the things that Carey did were subtle. And for some, that might be boring or not their way to write a book. But for me, I thought it was cool. I like the subtlety of these things placed in to the story.
So we've got these things called side quests, Abby, where we take a fun question and we ask it in relation to the book. So here's the side quest. You're a zombie survivor. Your ultimate team. You get to form the survival team in the world Girl with All the Gifts. What 3 characters from any book, movie, or game would you bring along with you? And do you think that they'd help you survive and thrive in this fungal apocalypse?
So I thought about this a lot, it's probably going to be really a nerdy answer. But I was originally thinking, you're here for the nerd.
We're here for the nerds, yeah.
Yeah. So I was originally going to say Ellie from The Last of Us, and then I thought about it, and I think I'm going to go with Abby from The Last of Us Part 2 because I liked her better. Hot take. And and then also I'm doing a rewatch of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and it's always been one of my favorite shows, so I'm going to go with Buffy because she's really good at fighting things and not getting bitten. Have you guys seen 7 Deadly Sins? It's an anime.
The anime? I
Yeah.
never finished it, but I've definitely watched probably like half of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Okay. So I was thinking Bon from 7 Deadly Sins because he is completely immortal and you could like burn him to ash and somehow he would form back together. So
Right.
I was like, he'd be a good one.
Seems like a good team.
Yeah, so I went the opposite of subtle because this is what I was thinking about this morning, and I came up with my answers this morning. And so the opposite of subtle for me, I'm like, okay, story about zombies, there's a movie adaptation, let's go with movies. And so I went with 1980s, 90s action flicks because they were so over the top. There was the opposite of subtle. So I replaced the characters. So for me, Parks the guy who would play Parks would be Dutch from Predator, Arnold Schwarzenegger from Predator. Ripley from Alien, because I think she's a fantastic female protagonist. Instead of Just Anu, it would be Ripley. And I thought about what movie doctor, 80s or 90s, would be fun to have around that's not a Caldwell, that's more ethical and cares about the world. I was like, oh, Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park. That's my movie team to fight the apocalypse. Dutch, Ripley, and Dr. Malcolm.
Well,
Amazing.
I did something similar. So I want what's his name from Project Hail Mary? What's the guy's name? I want him as the doctor. That's, my doctor character. Gonna keep him around. Let's see how that goes, because he's also kind of an engineer, and so I'm wondering if he can whip something up from us. But I went heavy on the science, so I also want Bulma from Dragon Ball Z to see if they can come up with something. Maybe we can get off this planet. And then, because I was thinking about Dragon Ball Z, I'm also going to take Goku, because then we can, destroy any zombies from a distance if we need to. So, mostly Dragon Ball Z with a mixture of Project Hail Mary for me.
All right.
Trying to leave the planet.
Cool.
Have you read Project Hail Mary, Abby?
I have not. It's on my list. I saw that it was, you guys talked about it.
Yeah, it's a fantastic book. Super good. Very emotional ride. Yeah. Because I read I started reading Martian, and I couldn't get into it. I liked the movie arc okay. And then I was like, all right, let me read the book. And for some reason, I couldn't get into it, and so I put it down. And then one of our other buddies who comes on the podcast with Spencer, he said, you have to read Project Hail Mary. And we kind of challenged him to get on the podcast and said, hey, you lead one of these things for us. And so that's the book he picked. And from, just like with this one, chapter 1 to chapter end, I was hooked. It's really, really well done. Pacing is great. Emotional aspects are awesome, I think. Character arcs are great. And the ending is bittersweet. It's a happy ending, but it's a little bit bittersweet.
It's also a White Room novel, which both of us hadn't read in a long time, where it just mostly takes place in one room, and then flashbacks of like piecing the story together, because the guy's on a spaceship, right? Like, and he wakes up. It's that aspect too, where you're like, so it's man against himself, and also reflecting on like what got him to this point, and the amnesia that he has to like, which is like one of the story elements. He's like slowly trying to remember all the things, which is then kind of a mystery for you as the reader, going, why did he get here? What is he doing? What is his mission? And so like those questions come up pretty early on, which is nice. It was a fun use of amnesia, honestly.
Yeah. And we didn't spoil anything for you.
That's like chapter 3. Chapters 1 through 3.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds like a good one.
If you're enjoying today's podcast, be sure to rate the show to help others discover it, and join us in building this casual book club together.
So let's talk about pacing a little bit, because for Jonathan, as he already alluded to, it didn't take off until 36. I thought it was fine. I liked it. I already said that. How did you, Abby, feel about the pacing of the story?
So I listened to the audiobook, actually. I was interested from the beginning. I think the narrator did a really good job, and I was super into it. I loved it the whole time.
Did you listen to the one with the music ambience, or just a straight read? Because there's 2 versions of the audiobook.
It had some music.
Okay. That's the one I listened to.
Yeah, I like the audio, or the narrator. She did a good job.
Yeah, I feel like I've heard her read other things, but I don't know exactly what they were. But yeah, she's definitely a good one.
A narrator can make it or break it.
100%.
For Spencer, he really hates
Nick Podell.
Nick Podell for some reason. He's the guy that's read
Name of the Wind.
Name of the Wind, and 2 others that we listened to.
Yeah. I love Nick Podell. He's great. Shout out, Nick.
I'm okay with Nick Podell, but Spencer can't stand him. The ones that I've hated are nonfiction books. For some reason, if you get just a boring guy who doesn't have any acting chops, which is fine, his voice is usually used for more straight technical books. But if you can't make a technical book or a history book sound even a tiny bit exciting, I don't know how these people get jobs.
I start a book if I cannot stand that narrator's voice. I know I know immediately. And I do also have one specifically that
Oh,
her name, Rebecca Soler. She mostly does like romantasy stuff, and I kind of haven't been reading that as much for a few years. But yeah, the second it's like, this is Rebecca Soler, I'm like, no, we're done.
Yeah.
Everyone needs a narrator to hate, I guess. But I looked up Finty Williams, who read The Girl with All the Gifts. Maybe the book that you heard her in was Winnie the Pooh. She's done a lot of those.
No.
Yeah, she's got like 10 of these on here. I was like,
Wow. I
oh,
didn't know there were
okay.
10 Winnie the Pooh books.
Neither did I. Winnie the Pooh, Pooh Goes Visiting. We've got Winnie the Pooh, just that's the title. And we've got Winnie the Pooh, Pooh Invents a New Game. We've got Winnie the
Wow.
Pooh, The House at Pooh Corner. And the list goes on.
Wow.
So,
Well, let's stop the list there.
New
The title-
ideas for next podcast.
yeah, just Winnie the Pooh books. Tigger Comes to the Forest. Anyway.
Amazing.
So let's talk character arcs. How did you feel about the character arcs that took place in the book? From Melanie to Justinu to Caldwell to Parks to Gallagher. Like, what did you enjoy them? Did you hate one of them? What was your take? Hot takes are welcome, by the way.
Okay. I think Sergeant Parks was probably my favorite. Not my favorite character, but like my favorite arc. Because I feel like he had more of a redemption arc. At first was like, this guy's awful. And he's like beating these children basically and like screaming at them. And then he ends up starting to care for Melanie too. I thought that one was really cool. Obviously, Dr. Caldwell sucks the
Yep.
whole time.
Yes.
And Justin is great the whole time. I really like Melanie as well. And I like how she gets, more like they start trusting her more and she just kind of gets stronger and is able to use her knowledge and skills to like help everybody.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever think that she was going to turn before the end of the book, Melanie?
I thought she might end up biting somebody, and then I think she would have felt really bad and maybe run off, but I didn't think she was going to like end up being a terrible person or anything.
Nice. Were there any parts of the plot or elements that surprised you in your first read?
I was really surprised once they hit like the wall of spores. And I was
Yeah.
like, wait, this is crazy. Like what like and then the pods that were just like piled up dead bodies of hungries or something. And I was like, so that I think was a turning point where I was like, oh, this is really bad. There's really no hope for humanity here.
What I want to know is, I don't remember it answering the question of like why all the bodies were there. Like they just kind of kept coming here to die. So that was a question that
Yeah.
I had.
Yeah, I don't think it explained that.
Yeah. Okay.
That is
Just
weird
making
that
sure I
they're
didn't
just
miss it.
like piles of bodies.
It's time to die. I guess I'm gonna go here.
Yeah. To join the pile.
Yeah. Oh, there's the pile. Now I can die. So the ending of the book, we have this philosophical trolley car problem, right? Like, was it right? Was it wrong for Melanie to do what she did? Now I understand we're doing Pandora's box, so like it has to go one way. She has to let the spores out, right? But in terms of a little bit of moral dilemma, do you let the humans that you've befriended survive? Are there other humans in the world? Or do we just let the spores out like Melanie did? Was it right? Was it wrong? Any other thoughts on that? Because it's kind of like I'd say it's like a heavy ending. At least for me, it left me conflicted where it's like, I get what she's doing, but she's also a child still, and I don't know if she's thought through all of the ramifications of this decision. Now, granted, this is a book. Slava gets on me for this. This is what I was talking about earlier, where I think ahead, thinking like longer strides. So this question to me is like, well, thinking through, yes, there are kids now, but could they recreate society in some way that doesn't like have to be an nihilistic decision, if you will? She's a child. She doesn't have all the information yet in terms of like how to survive as a hungry human, and things like that. So anyway, enough of my babbling. Thoughts and ideas on the trolley car problem at the end that Melanie makes her decision on.
I guess I didn't think about her. Yeah, like she's still a child, and she could have waited, I guess. I don't know that there was really an option for humanity, but I guess she could have waited and seen like how it's going to play out. Like, are they actually like, are these spores inevitable instead of just burning everything? I guess,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think about that before because I was like, oh yeah, Melanie's choosing it. She's right. She's the best. um, but yeah, she could have waited for sure and just like seen, like, obviously there was no cure, like humanity probably couldn't have survived, but she didn't have to go kill them all basically.
Right. Right. Well, and we get such a zoomed in view of like where this takes place. We don't know what's happening in Asia and Russia and America. So I mean, somebody else could have created maybe not a cure, but like something, or they could have made bunkers and like could have had like two camps, like the hungry humans on one side and like helping them stay satiated and fed and whatever. And like there were more options, and I didn't feel like there was an urgency to like I have to burn this down. Again, I understand it's Pandora's box, but this is how I come at books. And Slava, do you wanna berate me now with your response?
I don't think so. I think you've been berated enough.
Fair enough.
Let's do another fun side quest. If you guys had to cast the perfect movie adaptation, who would play the top characters? We have here Melanie, Justin, and Caldwell, but I say our 5 main characters, for Caldwell and Parks included. Who would be in your movie adaptation? Jonathan, start us off.
I don't know how to say his name, but I've got the perfect Parks. It's the guy from Peaky Blinders, Silam something or other. You know who I'm talking about? How do you say his name?
I don't remember. It's Celtic, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah,
something
yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, I have to IMDb his name, and then I'll try to slaughter it for you. Cillian Murphy.
It might be Killian.
It's Cillian Murphy.
Okay, Cillian Murphy. He would be Parks. That's my go-to Parks. I think he'd do a great job having that emotional journey. He's also very stoic, and I'd love to see him get like more emotional. We see a little bit of that in like Peaky Blinders, but I'd like to see more of it. As for Caldwell, who's the woman who plays Ratchet? I literally just know these people by character. Nurse Ratchet from Ratcheted. Sarah Paulson, I guess.
Sarah Paulson. Yeah, that's a good one.
I'd have her play Caldwell. As for Melanie, I don't know child actors right now. So I'm going to try and pull like young Dakota Fanning. I think that she'd do a good Melanie.
That's funny that you said that.
Why is that?
I was going to say Elle Fanning, which is her sister when she was younger.
All right, so we're on the same the same path here. And then I need a Gallagher and I need a Justinu. So for Justinu, what's her name? I might use Zoe Deschanel to throw kind of like a wild card in here because I don't think she's really done anything that's not Manic Pixie Dream Girl stuff. For the most part. And for Gallagher, who do I want to kill? Just for my own lulls. Let's go with Sean Bean. He's too old for Gallagher, but we'll just go with Sean Bean anyway, just because. Because he needs to die in things. That's my crew. Cillian Murphy for Parks, Sarah Paulson for Caldwell, Sean Bean for Gallagher, Zoe Deschanel for Justinu. Yes. Yep. That's the connection here. And then young Dakota Fanning for Melanie. That's my grouping.
So Elle Fanning for when she was younger. I couldn't tell you any like child actors.
Yeah, who were the child actors today? I don't know.
I have no idea. Justinu, I'm like picturing the perfect person in my mind, but I was looking for this person and I couldn't figure out where she came from. So I was thinking maybe Zendaya. Would be cool. And I picture Parks as like a really muscular, bald white guy. So I'm trying to think of like who's an actor.
Tom Hardy. He could just shave his head.
Sure. Or what's the wrestler? I don't know.
The Rock?
No, not the. I mean, I guess the Rock could do Parks too.
You mean the movie The Wrestler?
No, the John Cena.
Okay, here we go. Nice.
And then the mom in Hereditary.
Oh, okay.
For Dr. Caldwell, because I was trying to think of someone who could be like kind of creepy, but also kind of like, I picture her like really stirred with like a slick back bun. And then we have Gallagher. I don't really think much about Gallagher. I was
Nobody
like,
does.
I was,
No.
I was
Yeah.
like, what?
That's why he's sad.
At first, I was like, who are you talking about?
Yo, you didn't even remember him. Oh, okay.
I didn't even
Nice.
remember him. But yeah,
How quickly
he's the guy
dead
that
are
dies.
forgotten.
Yeah, it's just some dude. I don't know. I don't know if I have one for Gallagher. Is that okay?
That's okay.
That's okay.
So, keeping with the 90s, 80s theme, I went with 90s, 80s actors again. For Caldwell, I chose Glenn Close because she just seems like she could play a badass, and not in the sense of like a good badass, just like a really bad character. For Melanie, I went back and forth because I confined myself to the 90s, 80s actresses. I was like, Natalie Portman could play, a young Natalie Portman can play Melanie. And for Justinu, I thought, who was really loved and played lovable characters, but also played some badass women in the 90s? So Julia Roberts came to mind.
Oh, yeah.
For her, Bruce Willis is Parks. In my head, I just pictured Bruce freaking Willis. Yep. Bald and muscular and,
Checks out.
And then I had to look him up. That's why you guys saw me putzing around on the keyboard just now. I had to look him up. For Gallagher, somebody who could play sort of a wimpy guy, sort of kind of a guy who doesn't know himself and is kind of could play a little bit of a weakling, although Gallagher gets a little bit better throughout the book. I thought of Giovanni Ribisi. You guys remember him?
What was he in?
He was in The Boiler Room, and that's all I remember him. And The Boiler Room was like a 90s movie where he played this kid who was duped into working for stockbrokers, and he had a bad relationship with his dad, and he was kind of a can't get right. And then it turns out this job where he started to excel at and feel good about himself, they were all corrupt. It was a front. They were just stealing money from their investors. I actually pictured him when I was reading the book. It's like, this guy reminds me from the guy from Boiler Room for some reason. And I remember the movie specifically because I watched it and I thought it was a pretty good movie in the 90s. That's my cast that I'm submitting to the studios.
I'm going to make one addendum to my group. I'm going to swap out Zooey Deschanel for Anya Josephine Taylor-Joy, the gal who played
Anya
Queen's Gambit.
Taylor-Joy. She's my fave.
Yeah, I was thinking like, I don't actually think Zoe do a very good job at Miss Justinu. And then I was like, who could do this? And then I was thinking about her. So she'd be the gal that I'd swap out.
Good choice.
I think we got the makings of a movie here, friends.
I think so. We got a writer. We're all in marketing. We can get this done.
Yeah.
There you go. Marketing, you do anything in marketing.
Yeah.
That's right. If you do marketing, you do it all. Those are the rules these days. So this is the point in the tale, Abby, where we discuss themes. So want to hear your thoughts on some of the different themes that are discussed in the book. We have a number of them listed. I will list them out quickly. But if you came across something else while you were reading it, like, by all means, throw that in the mix here. So some of the themes that Slava and I talked about and addressed as like things that we saw were adult fear of a monstrous child, the apocalypse as a literary means to confront humanity's sins, defining human, and are we really so different from the monsters we are against, and then the hard necessity of reason versus the emotional comfort of empathy. So those are the four that we noticed, but if you notice anything else, like, by all means, throw it out there.
Not at the moment, but I'll think on it. Those are all good ones.
We usually pick one of these and have a discussion around it in terms of the book. So which one of these sounds like something you'd like to unpack a little bit with here as we wind this episode down.
Let's do the defining human are really so different from monsters.
Okay, very good. So, in the book, for a recap for the listeners, we come to find out that Melanie is like a Gen 2 Hungary, where her parents birthed her, and so the fungus has infected her mind in a specific way that allows her to, at least minimally or maximally, however you want to slice it, pun intended on that one, um, ends up being able to restrain her impulse that the Gen 1 Hungries have. And so the big question in the book is like, well, she's the new type of human, and the current version of human, the ones that we are, couldn't survive in the post-apocalyptic world that is displayed for us. So, um, is she really human, or has she become a mutant or a monster like an X-Man of sorts, but zombie version? That's today's discussion on the theme. What makes someone human?
I mean, I would say that, she's somewhere in the middle, obviously. Like, we keep talking about that, but and especially, like, you see her perspective in the beginning, and she's just like, she seems like a normal girl. She has some aspects of being human, and the fact that she's able to, like, restrain herself, she definitely, like, has that emotion, the human emotion, and that shows that they can grow. I know the other Hungries are a little they seem a little less human, but I think if Melanie could teach them, and she has Miss Justinu teaching them as well, then they could be a little more human.
What makes her human for me, and I do believe, and I agree with you, there's a mixture. She's like both and, is her ability, Melanie's ability to think, self-reflect. She has emotions, will, intellect. She has a curiosity to her to think back to different lessons Ms. Justinu has taught them. She talks about her interactions with other kids, her interactions with parks. She watches people interact. So she's constantly learning, like a kid would. A normal kid in a non-apocalyptic wasteland, sitting in a classroom, would pick out the teacher she likes, would be wary of the teachers that's mean to her, will reflect on what she did with Johnny and Susie at lunch. And then if she finds, in this example, the stories of the Greek myths interesting and somehow resonated with her because of something that happened in her family, a normal kid would interact with this environment, this information she's being given, in the same way. But in this world, she also wants to eat man flesh. So that's kind of like that's the twist, right? Because she's a zombie.
All right, I'll be the bad guy here. So I just to create a little drama for the show, I see Melanie like a leper. So lepers were purposefully not allowed to live with humans or other people because they were too infectious, and they had to make their own camps. They had to make their own societies, if you will, because they were too infectious. And so, although she has human elements and she was born a human, I think that based on the science of the book, she's actually a parasite human of sorts that is like not like I would not, if scientifically, I would not classify her as a human, specifically because she currently has an incurable disease. It is genetically, from our understanding, genetically altered her impulses to function differently than the resources that a human needs, which is why she can burn the thing at the end of the book and like survive. But as humans, we can't, which I think is evidence that she's not human, because the humans die when the things come out, the spores. So, well, I think that there can be some compassion for Melanie, assuming this all happened. I think that she's more of a leper. Like, she and her leper friends, although they're overrunning the world, should find a way to survive in a new society that we can create trade agreements with and tax each other. And,
Right, Dr. Caldwell.
Slice her brain open.
I'm not saying slice her brain open.
Yeah, so he's not Dr. Caldwell. He's Dr. Caldwell's son. That's just a shade removed from Caldwell.
Also, lepers are human.
Yeah. And here's the thing. I think you're taking it too literalistically. Like speculative fiction, science fiction, and this is science fiction, horror, something, it is a vehicle for exploring other questions.
I'm exploring.
But
I jumped in Rosie, and we're driving around.
But the book is sidestepping real world questions or scenarios and presenting fantastical scenarios in order to ask other questions.
Let's scrape away. Abby, I agree. Lepers are human, but it's an incurable disease. Did you know that armadillos carry leprosy? Fun fact.
No.
Yeah, they do. It's weird.
That's something that I would know. So add it
Now
to my
you do.
list.
That's right. Let's just take the one fact that I presented, that because Melanie, like, let's just prove and validate or invalidate if Melanie's a human. And here's my argument, and then the council will rest their case. Melanie destroyed this wall of spores, and she and her group survived, and the other humans, if they're all in the equal playing ground until we validate or invalidate this, could not survive in that environment. So is she human?
Scientifically, no, she's not a human.
Thank you very much. The council rests our case.
But we were talking about emotionally.
But if we're talking about cold, hard acts of a character, right?
I was going to say, let's talk
Caldwell's
about
not human.
Caldwell.
If Coleman's not human either, because she is cold and brutal and pragmatic to utilitarian. Forget pragmatic. She's utilitarian.
Yeah.
And at the end, you could say Melanie made a utilitarian choice. I will die on this hill. The book is asking a different question. Yeah, Melanie you did a shitty thing, right? Like Melanie killed all the humans. That's in world. But we're discussing what Carey, I think, what Carey is trying to posit, if I may. And I think it's a different question. So
what's the question?
Well, what is human? But again, you can't take it literally and say, well, she's inhuman because in world scientifically she's a hybrid. Yes, that's a fact, indisputable. The question between the lines, if you will, and Abby, back me up or correct me, it's a different question. It's not that black and white. It's not just a straight story. It's not a real world story, right? If this happened in real world scenario, then I think your point would have more validity, Jonathan. But this is
a fake story, so your point's invalid. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, that's fine.
Exactly for the thing that I said when I started my rebuttal is speculative fiction, science fiction creates fantastical scenarios to ask human questions.
Okay, so, let me bat this ball back at you guys then. Define what it is to be human. Give me the parameters.
I think you're going for scientifically human.
Yeah.
And we're talking about emotionally human.
And here, on the podcast, people on the podcast here on the panel, we're all Christians. For our worldview, there is an overarching truth, the capital T, what defines a human. We're made in the image of God. From that, something that Christians and non-Christians agree on, even materialist, like staunch, anti-supernatural, anti-religious folks, would agree that what makes a human is will, intellect, and emotion. We just happen to believe that was imprinted upon us by a creator. But that's what makes a human. Abby?
Yeah.
Back me up.
I mean...
Look, I already took the bad guy role. Just go ahead and defend yourselves, folks. I died on this flaming sword or flamethrower. That's what it is. Flamethrower.
Flaming pods of spores.
Yes.
Yeah, from a Christian perspective, God didn't make the
zombies,
hybrid zombies. So, I mean, like, hypothetically, she would not be human. But but this is, again, like a story and sci-fi. So,
you guys' argument is flawless.
But yeah, it's just questioning. Yeah, I mean, it's basically everything that Slava said, but it's just questioning, like...
Don't just side with him. It's going to go to his head. Oh.
I think it's just asking how would you define human? And, do you have empathy for this character? Like, is she human enough for you to empathize?
So I posed this in one of the previous episodes. There was a woman, I want to say in the 60s or 70s, who had an immunity to tuberculosis, I think it was. And the thing is, she was going around living her life normally. And the problem was she was causing tuberculosis in other people and they were dying.
Yeah.
And so they had to make the decision. Have you heard this before?
No, I haven't.
Oh, okay.
No, but
So-
I was like, wow.
And so they like captured her and locked her up. And they had this ethical dilemma of like, she's fine, but she's killing people inadvertently. What do you do? These are the questions that it's like someone has to make a hard decision. I'm not saying we should necessarily Caldwell, but I'm not saying we shouldn't either.
Well, here's my rebuttal to that. So take that example and put it
Put her in a leper camp.
No, put it in this world. So in this world, in this scenario, the woman you are speaking about, 98% of the world has tuberculosis or is tuberculosis immune. And then you have, 2% running around in little self-contained colonies are affected by tuberculosis. They're not immune. And then if we're combining the scenarios, in this scenario, you have a little girl who is immune to tuberculosis. She kills everybody else that doesn't have that immunity gene. And now the whole world is either hungries who are fully infected or like the children are immune. That's how I see putting those two scenarios together. It doesn't back you up. We're talking about, is this person, whether you're a tuberculosis woman in a world where tuberculosis is run amok, or this little girl who has a zombie gene but's kind of immune to it. So that's how the correlation I see between the two scenarios. The question still stands, and Abby and I are right in both scenarios. These people are human.
So my facts are a little wrong. It wasn't tuberculosis, it was typhoid, but they did quarantine her, and she escaped the first time, actually. And she spent like nearly 30 years in isolation because
Wow.
she was causing this in other people. She infected 51 people, 3 of whom died.
Only 3.
So
Sorry.
I mean, I guess
They're
they
human.
didn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
See,
I don't know.
It's not so easy, huh?
I didn't say it was easy.
But she's still human.
She's still human even if she carries typhoid fever.
Abby's getting a kick out of this. Oh, yeah, it's the craziest story. Healthy carrier of typhoid fever, carrying the bacteria but showing no symptoms. Wild. Audience, is Melanie human? Drop it in the comments. Let us know.
Are you
Who do you
Team
side with?
Justiny or Team Caldwell? Pretty much what you're saying.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying slice people's brains up. You're
Just
putting words in my
quarantine
mouth.
them. Yeah.
I
Just
mean,
quarantine.
it sounds.
Put them in
in a
camps.
leper colony.
Yeah, put them in camps. Build some camps in California. Gather up all the people and just put them in.
Oh, man.
Tax them as well, is what he said.
Yeah.
I said
Confiscate their property, maybe.
I said we could tax each other. If you rewind this episode and go back, I spelled out 2 societies living in harmony together and having trade agreements and taxing each other is what I said. So, you're
That
just
could
like Slava.
work.
You're putting words in my mouth. You're going to do great on this podcast.
Tariffs. They should put tariffs. 25% tariffs.
Oh boy. All right, here we
Too
go.
soon?
It's
Be the feudal
Too soon.
system.
Yeah.
barter only. The problem is everything we barter is now infected from them to us. Oh man.
Oh my gosh.
Good stuff. Well, as this episode wraps up here, Abby, we want to thank you for your recommendation and joining us on the show. Just as a reminder to everyone, you can find Abby on Instagram at Books and Crannies 2023, and you can also find her on Pango Books, which I didn't know was a thing, but I'm going to look up now. pangobooks.com/bookstore/books-and-crannies. So go look her up, buy some of her books, follow her on Instagram. We look forward to your next recommendation. Have you back on the show.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
It was.
Hey, before we go, can I ask you a question?
Do it.
Yeah.
Cool. My husband and I were talking about who we would put on our teams if we were in a zombie apocalypse, and he said Deadpool. And so I was wondering if you thought that Deadpool would heal himself from a zombie bite, or if he would get infected.
Oh.
Man,
I think he could heal himself, right? I mean, all I know about Deadpool is he could heal himself from injury, and he's unkillable. But what about his genes? Would his genes absorb the zombie?
no.
Thing,
He
and
he has to be able to heal himself, and I think Wolverine too, like has to be able to heal himself. So if he was in this place, they're basically unkillable. So my understanding of the X-Man science, if you will, is their genetic code is locked in stasis, and someone's going to at me in the comments about this being incorrect, but that's fine. And so like it always reverts back to original genetic structure to heal them. That's my understanding. So I think
Yeah,
that they'd be able to heal themselves.
that's what I was thinking as well. But I'm like, I don't know if they've ever like had a zombie bite infection. I mean, we need to ask someone at Marvel.
Yeah, that's the crossover that we didn't know we needed.
Correct. Yeah. But this is what I've been thinking about the past couple days. I'm like, Deadpool, zombies.
That's a great question. What other questions do you have? We didn't even ask you.
I think that was it. That was my big one.
Oh, okay. Nice.
All right, folks. Make sure to share this episode with fellow book adventurers. It helps more listeners discover SideQuest. And join us next time for more story adventures. Until then, happy questing.